Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Juan Cotto. From 18th Rainier Avenue South, and it is all over. And we talked about this last Tuesday night. It's all over. You get all of these in the mailbox, and this really is what political spending is all about, is getting in your mail. And we saw candidates for the last month, basically, actually for about the last 3 weeks, when the ballots go out, we get all of this stuff, and then all of a sudden it's up to you as a voter to make the decision.
Yeah.
And well, Cliff Cotton, we are starting to see the decisions come in, and boy, and of course, unlike any other time in the history of Seattle, this election has gone. I mean, and obviously, we remember it was Christine Gregoire and Dino Rossi for governor. We had a recount there. But this election and this race in particular.
Oh yeah,
the
Seattle mayor's race is a nail biter. So was the King County executive, but not like Seattle mayor's race.
No, this race in particular is one that really is captured the interest of the country. Certainly, Mamdani in New York and what he was able to accomplish, but. He was going up against a former governor and a political family.
Oh, yeah.
This is an incumbent mayor who has a semi-decent record.
Well, it's a very mixed record. And I'll say as someone who is originally from the Empire State, that to be able to take down a Cuomo so definitively, I think shows that there is a real shift in the zeitgeist when it comes to the electorate coast to coast. It wasn't just Mamdani in New York that this victory for Wilson, and I believe there's also Fatah in Minnesota. We are seeing progressive victories all over. That it's just amazing. But let me ask you something. You are going to recycle those, right?
We are. Yes, we are. That's
okay,
why I was going to throw them on the floor, but I thought, you know something? I'm going to put them right here, and we're going to recycle these. Would you like to take a look at them?
You know what? I've already looked at a lot of these. I think one of the things I found funny about and I live outside of the city of Seattle, so I am one of the casualties of the housing affordability crisis, so to speak, insofar as I had to move. But I have looked at the ones that have come to Seattle voters from some of my friends. And what I find really hilarious about a lot of these ads is how, for at least the city council races and also for mayor's races, it really was a conversation about affordability in a way that in it was in 2023, it was a conversation around public safety, and that dominated the zeitgeist. But really, it was about affordability, which is probably no surprise to anyone, given the kind of housing and now overall affordability crisis we have when it comes to groceries, when it comes to consumer goods, just really anything these days.
Tonight, for the next about 55 minutes, thank you.
Yeah.
I take the recycling. I'll take that out to the trash. For the next 55 minutes, we are going to come on and we are going to talk about the results. We're going to talk about all of the different races with an emphasis right now on the mayor's race. And obviously, I think Daniel's going to be able to pull it up. The most recent ballots returns have come in. They were basically certified, or they basically were counted by King County Records and Elections and the City of Seattle's office. And here's what we will come up with. I believe that Katie Wilson now has a 1,346 vote lead.
Yes.
So that is roughly, it's razor thin, Cliff.
It is. So with this right here, this could trigger a recount. And,
it will trigger a recount.
Absolutely.
1% triggers a recount, right?
So absolutely. This will definitely trigger a recount. Well, I say could, because remember, the election's not certified yet. Now, there is a very, 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 very slim chance that Bruce could come back from this. But in my personal opinion, that Katie has it. If if someone wanted to, so there are only 2,300 ballots left to count.
Mm-hmm.
That unless, in looking at Katie's lead, unless 80% of those were for Bruce, then Katie has it. Now, remember, of these ballots left to count, there's also last time I checked, something like over 1,000 ballots that need to be cured. Now, for curing ballots, that means that a signature didn't match. Sometimes people forget signatures. That happens. Sometimes there's other damage associated with the ballot, or something else went wrong. But mainly, it's a signature issue that voters can go to King County Elections website and check to see if their ballot was counted. And I encourage everyone that's listening to do that, because your ballot could decide this election. Yesterday, the lead was yesterday was Monday. Time is kind of fused together for me when watching the right.
The last week has fused together for all of us, I think.
Right. And Katie was only ahead by 91 votes yesterday. Now it's 1,346.
I want to come back to
that. Go ahead.
I think Timmy is. I see Timmy's name pops up. Is Timmy Trainer with us?
Hey,
Timmy,
how are you?
hello.
You guys hear me?
Trainer. Good to see you, my brother.
Good seeing you. Thank you for the time.
So
I love always talking about geeking out on politics.
You were texting me and you were looking at this, and I would love to hear your analysis from a man who has analyzed many.
Yes.
Well, I think the funny thing is that Harold is a victim of being an incumbent in an anti-incumbent cycle. So we can talk a lot about progressive or not progressive, but at the end of the day, almost all of the incumbents lost, or parties trying to keep it, whether in Virginia. And I think there is a movement that allows millions of dollars to come into races. And I think Katie Wilson was a benefit of that. I don't think most people had her on any radar screen even 6 months ago. And now she's going to become, I would say, I'd say 95% sure that she's going to hold on in the final analysis.
Tim, take us through the recall process. What is the process there? You mentioned a couple of friends of ours and a couple of our close consultant friends that have experienced this before. Take us through this and tell us what happens and what can we expect over the next couple of weeks while these numbers are being certified.
I think the big question is certification. In any recount environment, who certifies first at the top is the most important. And the key is when the final vote tally is within 50 votes, give or take. At 50 votes, mistakes happen.
Right.
Less than 50 votes, anything can happen. More than 50 votes, it's almost always over.
Right.
So I think the big fight will be, you mentioned curing ballots a few minutes ago. I think the other piece will be, what is the certification process? Because there's still going to be provisional ballots, challenge ballots, and the other. So I think, and I believe it's November 25th is when they're going to certify the election. So I think you're still going to see a lot of craziness between the next 10 days, honestly, until whether those curing ballots, looking at what those challenge ballots are. And I still think it will probably come within the margin of write-ins. I think Harold probably it will become closer than we are today, I think.
So, Timmy, first of all, it's great to meet you. I wish I could meet you in person. Juan told me a lot about your record, so I'm really interested in something you said before about millions of dollars and, for God, I don't know, for a couple of decades now, that money in politics has been a big problem. However, one of the interesting things that we saw in this race, in particular, mayor's race, and also actually in New York, is the candidate that didn't have the biggest PAC won. That for Andrew Cuomo, and correct me if I'm wrong on the numbers, but with Andrew Cuomo, we saw him bring in millions from various interests within New York City and outside New York City. here in Seattle that we saw a very similar dynamic play out with Bruce Harrell's PACs with Bruce Harrell's campaign, and also a lot of the PACs that put out independent expenditures. While Wilson, on the other hand, did have a number of independent organizations and, spent some money herself. But if memory serves, she was the still the underdog. So can you explain a little bit about what you meant when you were saying that this anti-incumbency wave was a beneficiary of this wave of money flowing into campaigns?
Yeah, I think there's two different ways to think about it. One is the amount of money that traditional businesses, which you saw a lot of the money moving in New York against Mamdani, was traditional business interests involved with the city who did not want Mamdani as mayor. A lot
Right.
of the money moved to Harrell late in the game was traditional business money who did not want Sarah Wilson as the mayor.
Right.
What's changed over the last decade is that candidates who would not have been able to receive money, like Katie Wilson, are now able to get money via around the country.
Yes.
Who will want to put money into that race. And I think that for lack of a better word, the nationalization of the Seattle's mayor's race, which has never really happened before. And I think Katie Wilson is the beneficiary of that. And I also think the other interesting thing is the way you look at the way the map has evolved. Take a look at the way the 7th Congressional District and the 9th Congressional District voted in this race. The 7th Congressional District, which is Jayapal's seat, which is a more suburban, more northern city, more West Seattle, Harrell won with almost 58% of the vote. Where you look at the 9th Congressional District, which is a lot of Capitol Hill and more Southeast Seattle, which is Adam Sitt's district, Wilson is is doing quite well.
Right.
So when you look at the city, think of there's almost two distinct Seattles voting on any given election. I think what Wilson was able to do was coalesce a lot of anger towards Trump. That's a lot of it's genuine. And I think she was able to nationalize the election, not in some ways not different than Mamdani or Cheryl or Spanberger in Virginia.
The conversation about experience, Tim. The conversation about experience. Bruce has had far more, I guess, practical and logical experience for someone who was going to be a mayor. He ran a law firm. He's been involved in a numerous amount of community organizations and activities. He was a Seattle City Council member for an extended period of time, and so he had the experience in City Hall. He's had to build a staff of people to work with him in the mayor's office. He's had to manage all 41 of the departments, so that's a whole nother separate conversation why a government has 41 different departments. But nevertheless, he's had the experience to do that. Well, that proves that it is. But let me ask you this question. The experience factor, if elected, how does Katie Wilson, and you've seen it from the inside, how does Katie Wilson build her team?
I think she's about to drink from a fire hose. The thing about being a mayor is on any given day, your entire career can change and the city can change. The phrase on the job training is, she's going to have to learn, and she's never, she basically started off at, hitting a home run. So she's in the show, and either two things are going to happen. Either she's going to grow with the show. She's going to be able to show that, her plans are going to be, can you get the votes on the city council for her plans? Just like Mamdani in New York, can he get Albany to support his plans? I think she's going to have a hard time, actually. I think she's going to have a honeymoon period for about a year, and then I think the economy of Seattle is going to be what's really voters are going to approve whether she did a good job or not. And I think the other big piece is public safety.
Who
I think
is
they're
there,
going to look to her for public safety questions.
is there anybody that comes to mind? And I know that you are in Washington, D.C. right now, but your fingers are still a little bit in the mix.
Mhm.
Is there anyone that comes to mind that you think that would be able to help her? What type of leader, what type of people should she be looking for?
Also, I want to follow up on one thing after this.
Go ahead. Tim, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, wait a minute.
Yep. Hello, did we lose you? Timmy?
Can you hear me?
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, we can hear you. Yep, there you are.
I think if I was her, I would focus on public safety first.
Mm.
Don't not focus on all the other things that she talked about. Focus on police, fire, ambulance, the most core functions of a city. If she can get the trust of people, she can get trust of the rank and file of the law enforcement and the firefighters. I would focus on those kinds of issues first, because if all of a sudden she starts going into having problems with public safety, the rest of the community is going to have real questions on what her ability is going to be.
So I want to offer an alternative perspective when it comes to experience, because the experience argument, I feel like, given what we've seen, that people heard the experience argument, and Timmy, again, I'm really interested in your analysis after I set up this framing, but they heard the experience argument and they said, yeah, we have experience too, and our experience with this sucks, right? Particularly when it came to the kind of, I feel like Bruce Harrell represents a very traditional type of politician. Like you said, he was on city council. He was a lawyer for a long time, representing people in the community. He was involved with several community organizations as a lawyer, in the early 2000s, particularly dealing with the light rail, and he grew up here. Whereas with Katie, represents the type of experience that is non-traditional. For a long time, she was a community organizer. She was someone who worked a lot of service jobs before that. She's someone who doesn't have the kind of professional background, professional degree that Mayor Harrell does. But with that, and myself coming from a community organizing experience, I can tell you that there is a lot of policy, a lot of big learning curve that comes with dealing with policy, and albeit you're not enacting it, that you're often providing analysis. You're often really sometimes even writing some of these bills and initiatives that come with it. So with that, I'm just curious as to how, whether or not Katie should proceed like a, for lack of a better way to put it, a typical politician. Like, I hear you with what you're saying when it comes to within the institution on trying to get the police, firefighters, and public safety on her side. However, again, the voters seem to reject that message. So, Tommy, I'm curious about your thoughts on that. Like, given the voters rejected that.
Yeah, I think part of the issue is that it's an extremely divided electorate and an extremely divided city. So when you're at a 50-50 race, even if you, a lot of the voters are not supportive of her. So she needs to make sure she moves, for lack of it, towards the center, which the majority of the voters in the city are. I think she was able to.
Go ahead, Timmy.
Go ahead.
I was going to say the danger of hubris, correct?
I mean,
yes, absolutely. The worst thing is that people believe that she was a goddess. And I think Bruce Harrell, I think part of the issue is anytime you're a big city mayor, it's a very, very hard job. And we've had lost 4 since Greg Nichols.
Yes.
4 mayors have lost. No one has reached one term beyond Greg 20 years ago.
Nevertheless, all those mayors, many of those mayors were centrist. Hell, some of them governed in what some would say is a conservative fashion. And like you mentioned, Seattle's kind of fickle when it comes to reelecting mayors. So if Katie wanted to get that, kind of landmark second term, wouldn't it make more sense to govern based on the progressive coalition that has gotten her into this position as an institutional outsider?
I think every cycle is different. Every 2 years is different. You mentioned it at the beginning, 2 or 3 years ago, it was primarily public safety. 2 or 3 years now, it could be 2 or 3,
Right.
4 years from now, completely different issue sets that's
Mm.
going to be involved.
You saw it up close and personal when your wife experienced with Greg. Tell us about what goes on in the mayor's office. I mean, after the election, after the campaign, after the inauguration, when the lights go off and the media goes away, and no one talks about this and they always talk about the first 100 days. What goes on in those first 100 days, and what does that structure look like, and what will it kind of look like for Katie Wilson?
Yeah.
Well, the key is transition, right? It all starts at transition. If you don't have a very good lineup of people to remember, there are hundreds of jobs at stake. Multiple departments, and most of them she probably doesn't even know of herself yet.
I'll be honest, I don't know all 41 either.
Exactly.
Yeah, I'm a huge political nerd, and I don't either.
And that's a lot. And I think the other biggest issue that she's going to deal with is that the economy is slowing in Seattle. You're seeing the layoffs at Amazon, you're seeing layoffs at Microsoft, you're seeing people aren't seeing the rapid appreciation of their house on Zillow. So I think there is concerns economically about Seattle that haven't existed before. And I think that's going to be an interesting piece. And then I think the other interesting thing she's going to need to understand or work through is with the business community. I think she has all the votes she has within the progressive community, I believe.
Going back to one more point
Yeah.
that I wanted about public safety, we have a new police chief. The police chief was hired from Wisconsin early last spring. And there were several reports about him that came out during the spring and summer. His wife has not moved out with him, although she's got a very good job back in Wisconsin or the place that she's at. His family's not moved out with him. And then we found out that he took a $50,000 bonus for taking the position, and he's been flying back and forth on the weekends. And we heard some things. However, he has come in and he has structured the police department. That's going to be one of the critical issues he's going to have to deal with right off the bat is with this brand new police chief, how she's going to deal with that whole situation.
And not to mention, he fired some of the top civilian staff recently.
I think if I remember back with Regina and Greg, one of the very first decisions they ever made was to keep Gil Kurlikowski as police chief.
That's right.
I think as mayor, you're probably seeing this most important hire is your police chief, and your second is your fire chief. And I think the third is your economic development person. So who Katie puts in those three positions, whether they're retained from the Herald administration or not, needs to have widely respected by the community.
Of course, I was referring to police chief Sean Barnes. Go ahead.
Yeah.
So I want to come back to that conversation around affordability because, well, I mean, so we've seen a decrease in crime nationally and even within the city of Seattle and, the region as a whole. We've seen a decrease in violent crime. We've seen decrease in property crime. And even on a national level, I don't know if you remember, even the National Retail Association basically said that the rings of organized theft that in, God, I want to say between 2021 and up until really last year that, caught the attention of the national media were largely made up. And I'm wondering, if we, you mentioned that that she should work on public safety, but given the gains on public safety, don't you think that the question of affordability is directly related to public safety insofar as that the kind of property crime we see, the discord, that a lot of that it goes back to both poverty and displacement and things like that. Shouldn't she that be part of that like public safety intervention.
Well, I think the good news for everyone is that, and this is around the country, that the pandemic is gone, and the crime wave associated with that is pretty much over. I think I think the whole world is glad about that. I think the main issue with public safety is that is also, it's also ephemeral. It's homelessness. How does that impact at Westlake in downtown? What happens when a mass shooting can happen on any given day? I think, and also one of the biggest is, there are hundreds of Seattle police officers across the city every single day. They are the individuals, the public's actually attention to city government is usually through the police and fire. So I think the other piece that people are looking at is affordability is a issue that the mayor cannot control. It's like inflation. If the president can barely control inflation, the mayor can't. What the mayor can do, though, is actually increase more density in housing. So there's more housing being built, putting lower pressures on that. The population of Seattle is still growing every year. Every year. I think the biggest thing is if the population growth starts to stall because of jobs.
Yeah, sure.
On your community radio station, Rainier Avenue Radio.world, the political follow-up from last week's elections with Juan Cotto and Cliff Coffin.
Yes.
We are here at HQ. We are about to come up on a break. Daniel, should we go to the break? Tim, can you stay with us a little bit longer?
I can stay for the top of the hour. Yep.
We are going to go ahead and go to a break.
Excellent.
And we'll come back and we will examine the mayor's race and also go into some of the other races right here in King County and throughout the region on your community radio station, Rainier Avenue Radio.world.
Enjoy this crossover.
This is Paul Pearson, host of Star Time, and when I'm not busy tearing the roof off the suckers, I'm listening to Rainier Avenue Radio.world.
Sediment cleanup of the lower Duwamish River has begun. The U.S. Environmental Protection Agency and the members of the lower Duwamish Waterway Group, which includes King County, the City of Seattle, and Boeing, have begun sediment cleanup of the lower Duwamish Waterfall Superfund site. This important environmental project will address sediment pollution and help restore the health of the Duwamish River. Starting in the waterway's upper reach, construction activities extend from the south 102nd Street Bridge down straight to the Duwamish Waterway Park. Over the next 3 years, in-water activities will occur from October to February, ending in February 2027. Visit ldwg.org to learn about the upper reach cleanup and sign up for email updates.
Hello, I'm Tony Young, and every week I will be your guide to the music of the Fab Four with my show, With the Beatles. John Lennon, Paul McCartney, George Harrison, and Ringo Starr, those four lads from Liverpool. First airings are Tuesday night from 7 to 9 p.m. with repeats on Thursdays and Saturdays from 8 to 10 a.m. right here on Rainier Avenue Radio. Tune in to catch Beatlemania.
Totally bored? Mindlessly scrolling? Put down your phone and pick up a free youth transit pass. Youth 18 and younger ride for free. Go all the places. Do all the things. Escape the scroll at freeyouthtransitpass.com.
Hey, Seattle. Tune in to Lidline Sports every Monday, 7 p.m. to 8 p.m.
What up, yo? We are back. This is Pep and the man that don't take no mess, Mr. O-P-I-S, Mr. Stevenson. What say you?
I hope you see the hat that I'm wearing right now. That's how mad I am.
I do. Man, you are angry.
I just want to make that be known. Tune
Lidline Sports.
Hey, Seattle. Here are some storage tips to love food, stop waste. Onions make potatoes sprout faster. Keep onions away from potatoes. Ripe bananas give off a gas that makes the fruit around them ripen faster. Store bananas away from other fruits. 40% of food in the U.S. goes uneaten. Save money, save food, save the planet. Visit Seattle Public Utilities for more tips.
You are listening to Rainier Avenue Radio,
your community radio station.
I like that bumper.
Yes.
Welcome back to the election results show on your community radio station, Rainier Avenue Radio.
Hey, everyone.
World. With Cough, Juan Cotto touching bases with you from Rainier Avenue Radio headquarters. I did WIAA primetime at home, and I sit down here on a lime bite to sit down and discuss. When I got back home, the numbers were up, and Katie Wilson has got a 1,300 vote lead over Bruce Perrell, the incumbent mayor here in the city of Seattle. Obviously, this election has taken so much of the national news and the local news and all of the debates that we went to and candidates formed. These two candidates just sucked the life out of the audiences. I mean, they were really going at it, and it was a much more contentious race than any Seattle mayor's race that I could ever remember. And Tim, there's a couple of things that I learned about Katie Wilson. I want to get your thoughts on Katie for a second. Two questions I'm going to ask you, both related to kind of the federal side of things. Number one, I've seen Katie Wilson in action. She certainly stood up to the mayor, sitting right next to her on multiple occasions.
Oh, yeah.
And as strong as an individual, and her comebacks and her remarks, some of them could be directed right with a jab. Others were kind of like a roundhouse hook. Others were very subtle, but she was able to really stand up. The first question I would have for you is, number one, when people say that, how is she going to stand up to Donald Trump? How will she stand up to Donald Trump? And some of the things that we've heard, and that was a shot at the experience. The second thing is this, and you can answer both of these. Who should be more concerned right now, looking at the results of this election? Adam Smith, Pramila Jayapal?
Great question. Great questions. I think I'll start with the last one, the 7th district versus the 9th district. I think when they were designing the maps to create a swing district, for a lack of a better word, you would have created the 7th congressional district in Seattle. It is, if you wanted to put all the moderates in one congressional district, it would probably be the 7th. It would have North Seattle, has West Seattle, has Magnolia, it has Broadmoor, it has Fremont and Wallingford, but not very much of Capitol Hill, and none of Southeast Seattle. I would believe, and I believe when you look at the numbers, Harrell won the 7th congressional district at around 58% of the vote. I will need to take a look. So you have two completely different districts inside the city of Seattle. So if Harrell won the 7th district with 58% of the vote, he lost the 9th district by probably about 56%. So I think in a very weird way, the 7th congressional district is a natural fit for Adam Smith, while the 9th congressional district is probably more of a natural fit for Pramila Jayapal. So how that evolves over the next 2 years is a unique thing that I think has national implications. But if you look at the map, you even decided by precinct, which is in the moderate congressional district, and I think when they were making the districts, Adam Smith would never assumed he would actually have a left-wing challenger, and is probably very glad today that large chunk of his district goes all the way up around the lake to Bellevue. And I think the other interesting thing is that I noticed was Katie Wilson's not known yet. And the thing that I fear is Donald Trump is crazy and cannot be trusted. And if he decides to say Seattle's now under communist rule or some other thing, he could cause a lot of havoc, like he did in Portland, like he's done in Chicago.
Yep.
And that is actually the thing I fear the worst, is that it's not necessarily her standing up to Trump, is that Trump starts to play around with political power and to make her a new foil and put her on a national scale.
Yeah. It's funny. It's funny you say that, because if we were having this conversation even a couple of months ago, I would have brought up basically how the courts have halted him in Portland, they've halted him in Chicago and LA. However, he has demonstrated time and time again a complete disregard for the rule of law, and that kind of sensationalized. I'm trying to, ironically, for a podcaster, I can't find the words, but like the willingness to hijack the apparatus of the presidency under the auspices of an emergency, right? Like, and this is an interesting thing you bring up, because so to go back to what you said about the 7th and 9th, I find it fascinating, because if we look at the 7th, that Pramila has won astoundingly, just knockout. If memory serves, her first election, she won. She had a blowout win, a definitive win, and in subsequent elections, she has proven to be very popular member of Congress in her district, even though it has Magnolia, Admiral, Broadmoor, many of those moderate, even conservative neighborhoods within her district. The 9th, on the other hand, you mentioned it goes all the way around to Bellevue. It also includes many of the suburbs of South King County, as well as all the way to the northern tip of Tacoma. And Adam Smith has been able to fend off, if memory serves, about in the last decade, about 2 or 3 legitimate left-wing challengers. Now, maybe it's just me, but I feel like this race has a lot to teach Adam Smith. Not necessarily to say that Shama Sawant is going to be an effective challenger. I have my own personal feelings about that. I think, given the way that she's demonstrated that she wants to run her campaign, that she's not going to be an effective challenger in the majority of the 9th congressional district outside of the city of Seattle, certainly not in South Seattle, or even in South King County, and certainly not in Bellevue. But I think like this particular campaign is a bit of a wake-up call, because of how Katie Wilson campaigned, and like you mentioned before, Timmy, the anti-incumbent feeling that we're seeing nationally. Now, going back to something you said before about the economy that kind of tangentially relates to this, is you mentioned that the mayor can only do so much. And Katie made a whole platform, I've mentioned it several times, about affordability, but like getting into the details of her platform and some of those themes. I'm wondering, what do you think? Do you think she's going to be able to deliver on those particular campaign promises and ideas around affordability, whether it comes to transit or the cost of groceries, or especially around affordable housing?
Well, a lot of good points there. I'll go back to one of the things you mentioned earlier about the 7th district and the 9th district. I think about congressional races are very unique in that sense. I think Jayapal hasn't really been. She kind of won in 2016. Is not a very strong race. Not a lot of people got in the race. There's only 3 people. She kind of rode the Bernie coattails pretty far. I think Adam Smith will be the next chairman of the House Armed Services Committee, because the one thing that we can prove about last week is the Democrats are going to take the House. So if there's a constituency in Seattle who wants to vote against the next chairman of the House Armed Services Committee, they can go right ahead. But I don't think that will be I think Sawant will raise more money than people ever expect to run against Adam Smith. I think Adam Smith, for the first time, probably since the 90s, has to run a real campaign, though.
Yeah.
Like an honest to God, real campaign.
Right.
I do think Jayapal is vulnerable to a moderate candidate. I think there's two Jayapals. There's the one you see in Seattle, and then the one who's on national television. So the one in the Congress has a lot of, for lack of a better word, enemies who are very interested in that candidate. But I do think the affordability problem that Katie's going to be up against really fast is those are much larger market forces of affordability.
The people say the same thing about me, Tim Trainer. They say that there's the Juan Cotto at Rainier Avenue Radio, and then the Juan Cotto that we see out on the street.
Yes.
Having said that, we're going to pull out some of the results from last week on your community radio station, Rainier Avenue Radio. Well, let's talk about some of the other races as we look into this. Let's talk about the King County Executive. Girme Zahale, a young man from right down here at the Rainier Valley.
Yeah.
He went to high school at Franklin. He's I believe he is a Stanford undergrad, Harvard attorney. Is that
and he grew up a bit in Skyway, too.
That is correct. So this young man, he was able to take on Claudia Balducci once again in regards to substance of policy. You know, both pretty much established. You know, I don't want to call them left-leaning, but I guess it's probably the best way to describe them. They are. Yeah. I mean, if Claudia Balducci had won this election, I don't think people would be upset about it. But however, I think the style and the dynamic youth of this young man and the very, very powerful story may have been worth the 7 points or the 6.5 points that he wins by. Girme Zahale is going to be our Girmay. Thank you, my guy Girmay. Girmay Zahale will be our next King County executive. Cliff, what do you have to say about that?
So it's interesting that you say that because I remember reading a little bit of analysis, and the interesting thing about Girmay's campaigning style and his message is that he appealed to youth. That he actually not even just youth, but he appealed to how should I put this? He ran on vision and on wanting to do things differently versus Claudia Balducci, that her message was tailored towards an older, for lack of a better way to put it, more established base of voters, the kind of traditional older homeowners and people who were really more concerned about experience. And the interesting thing in this race is you saw similar things in the messaging, albeit not as I'll just be honest with it, not as vitriolic as the kind of messaging that Mayor Harrell deployed after the primary, but the similar things of experience versus newness and new vision. And it seems like the people of King County wanted to go with the latter instead of the former, even though both of them have a wealth of experience, albeit Claudia Balducci has more institutional experience within King County and within local government. But one thing I'll point out about Girmay's message in particular is, well, I think maybe a challenge for him is really executing a lot of his promises and a lot of what he wants to deliver on, given the oncoming recession we're facing. Right now, for local governments, money is going to be tight. Like, let's just be real about that. For state and for local governments, money is tight. So that's going to be I think, particularly for King County as a jurisdiction that is actually funding a number of constituent services in unincorporated areas and supporting number things like mass transit for our region, that it's going to be a balancing act.
Tim Traynor, you ran Greg Nichols' campaign for the King County Executive. I believe that was back in 1994. What do you think about Guillermo Zalhe and what he's going to bring to this office?
Well, I think the hardest part in any King County executive race is to tell people what the King County executive actually does.
Right.
Most people have no idea what it does, and I think it's fascinating when you look at the election map. Claudia Belducci, it was all red, the east side. All South King County was the east side, and I think Gourmet really benefited by the Katie Wilson vote.
Interesting.
Yeah, so if you look at the margins, because the vote in Seattle, because it was a contested race, was dramatically larger than the suburbs. So I think he should thank her for that and buy her roses. And I think they're going to need it, both of them together, because of the economy issue, I believe.
We're going to look at a couple of these other races, but let's see what the next one that Daniel pops up for us. I was thinking the same thing in regards to, and I had this conversation last week with Michael Wolf, who's with us from Drive Forward. But when you think about it, and Tim, and obviously with my political acumen, I just didn't see how you were going to vote for Bruce Harrell if you were voting for Alexis Mercedes Rink,
Exactly.
Erica Evans, Dion Foster, and Katie Wilson. I'm sorry. I mean, if you look at those candidates, those progressive candidates, and that's Erica Evans, who's now, and Eddie Lynn down here in the 2nd district.
Right.
I didn't understand why you would vote for Bruce. So I definitely think there's something. Absolutely. I mean, certainly, if a lot of people, obviously in this general election, a lot of people voted for Bruce. I mean, almost to a point where he caught up to Katie in the primary. But still, I think your point is valid. That energetic youth that was out for Katie Wilson certainly and for all those other candidates, certainly spurred on candidates like Gourmet and the rest of them.
I mean, I think the interesting thing about the city attorney's race is that if Ann Davidson never told anyone she ever voted for Trump, no one knows she voted for Trump. So she made her own mistake by making it and allowed an opponent to make it a partisan race. I think if you look at the swing voters between the mayor's race and the city attorney's race, is again, it still follows the 7th district, 9th district pattern. The big difference in the swing voters is Harold's did much better in Southeast Seattle compared to the other races. So if you look at the swing voter, that there is it goes to who voting for the progressives and then voted for Harold, primarily Southeast Seattle.
So the interesting thing I want to point out is, and it goes along with what you're saying, but my reading of the map was that you had any area where you could see water, see the mountains, like those seaside and lakeside homes that they went heavily for Harold versus inner Seattle, right? The places like I'm trying
Brighton,
to think. Delridge, and
right.
like you mentioned,
Right.
Capitol Hill, the CD,
Hill.
University District, so on and so forth. But also, one of the interesting things that I'm curious about your take on is, do you think, so in addition to making us more of a partisan race when it came to city attorney's race, do you think maybe the city attorney race was also a case of buyer's remorse on the part of the more moderate voters that voted for Ann Davidson originally, thinking, okay, she's going to clean up the crime problem, it's going to clean up the homelessness, so on and so forth. She's going to clean up the vagrants, basically. And instead, they saw a city attorney that was emphasizing prosecution, that wasn't really going along with the kind of progressive discipline that Seattleites often like to pride themselves on, and the electorate saw that, was like, oh no, we have to go in the other direction. Like, what do you think?
Well, I mean, I think Ann Davidson also had to deal with, she was an incumbent. If you have an anti-incumbent wave, and she could say crime is down, people aren't going to believe you that crime is down, even if crime is down. So it's always easier to make the argument of change. And I also think the candidate one was a legitimate person who could be city attorney. 4 years ago, the person who was who ran against Davidson was not considered a viable person to be city attorney. So you had a lot of people falling behind Davison. I would say the bigger question is, again, I think there's two Seattles. I really think there's a 7th district Seattle, which is a moderate, suburban-like, high income, as you mentioned. Like, if you see the water in the mountains, you're going to vote for one candidate. If you don't see anything, you're going to vote for another candidate. And I think the other piece is people who've moved to Seattle recently versus longtime Seattleites. And I would assume in this race, Harrell won longtime Seattleites, Wilson won recent transplants. And I think that's very common.
Let's bring up the other races on your community radio station, Rainier Avenue Radio .world. Juan Cotto, Cliff Coffin, Tim Trainer joining us tonight. Let's look at Eddie Lynn down in the 2nd district. Eddie Lynn, I mean, really, and once again, a candidate, Adonis Duckworth, who was supported by the mayor, Seattle City, he's a Seattle City employee. Eddie Lynn, obviously, I believe he worked in the King County Prosecutor's Office at one time, but certainly a major distance. And one of the things that I found interesting in the primary, one of the mailings that went out on Adonis Duckworth, he never voted, which I thought was interesting. And I wanted to bring him on the show to talk about that. Tanya Wu, when she ran for the Seattle City Council, she's a person who didn't vote, said that they don't vote in her culture. But they had all of I mean, it was like 20 years of voting, if I'm not mistaken, on what I saw. And Adonis hadn't voted. And I think that is something where that's the fundamental point of being, participating in our electorate is voting. And if you don't vote, I don't know how you can make up for that.
And also, Toomey, before you jump in, I just want to say something else that I think a factor. I don't know how much of a factor, but I'm just gonna say. And I love my people. So
you love your people.
Yes.
Who are your people?
Well, I mean, there are several different layers to that, but I'm talking about brothers and sisters. You know this, cousin. You know this,
cousin.
But I will say this. I was deeply disappointed with him. I was at a forum, actually, right here at Southside Commons.
Sure.
Where and also the world is my people. No, I'm just
I know.
But yeah, I know. But no, that was funny. I was very disappointed with him when a question came up about his connections with Mayor Harrell, and he didn't just refuse to answer that, but he came off horribly defensive. I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm not perfect. At least when I ran for office, I didn't get completely out of pocket during any public appearances. But, you're a human being, like it happens. But his answer was not just horribly defensive, but he literally entered the space in saying, hey, I know I'm probably not the candidate for many of you in this room, but I'm here anyway. That was such a losing, it was. I remember hearing that and I'm saying, you know what? I want to like you. You seem okay. I always want to, especially for brothers and sisters, I always want to give them the benefit of a doubt. But that was such a hostile, dismissive way of introducing yourself into. And I recognized a number of the people in the room to many of your would-be constituents. So anyway, sorry, Timmy, I just want to add that context to kind of build on what Juan was asking.
Let me ask you this, and we'll quickly go through. I mean, we saw Alexis Mercedes Rink. She cleaned up her opposition, Rachel Savage, a large margin there. We saw here the president of the Seattle City Council, Sarah Nelson, a longtime Seattle political active person, and she gets trounced by Dion Foster, who once again, very attractive, very intelligent. I just so impressed with this young woman when I had an opportunity to meet with her.
I mean, Dion's been around for a long time, though.
And she has been around for a while. She's articulated a lot of the issues that Cliff had brought up. What does this make? I mean, I remember when Shama was on the Seattle City Council, Councilmember Sawant Tim, it felt like she was all by herself. Here we are now with the Seattle City Council, which has a lot of people together. Lynn, and we have Rink, we have Dion Foster. We have a lot of people now. It's almost like a little bit of a coalition that's going to be working together.
Well, I think it just tells you just to look. I think Sarah to lose the city council president in a landslide, just shows you that you had an anti-incumbent year. You know, that to me, because most elections, you need to throw the bum out for a reason, as they like to say. And she didn't necessarily have any real reason other than the fact she was a long-term incumbent. And if you were an incumbent and you had a viable challenger, I think, which is always a bigger difference.
So wait, what's that? We're coming up on the end of the evening. I want you to say here, both of you. I'm going to give you each. I'm going to give. Why don't we give Timmy a minute?
Well, yeah. Except I do want to just point out something that Alexis is not an incumbent. I mean, is an incumbent. So I'm kind of curious. In your next minute, how do you address that wrinkle? Because for the executives race that was open, for the District 2 race was open, like you mentioned, Sarah Nelson was an incumbent, like you mentioned, Ann Davidson was an incumbent, Bruce Harrell was the incumbent, but there's that exception for Alexis Mercedes Ring.
Finishing out a term, Tim, finishing out a term, does that make her a true incumbent?
I would say I would say that you when you lose 3 incumbents, just like you just mentioned 1 minute ago, Cliff, you just showed you had an anti-incumbent year. Because I can't remember in Seattle's politics where 3 major incumbents lost.
Tim, 1 minute. Give us your final thoughts on this election.
Trump. Trump was the underlying motive to get millions of people to vote this year, both in Washington State and around the country. And his motivation drove a lot of people who normally wouldn't vote in an off-year election. And I think in Seattle, when you lose, just as you said, Cliff, when you lose 3 incumbents, that's a lot. And I really think the next year is going to be crazy. I think you're going to have a lot of fight over, is it going to be a more progressive government and a backlash to that, or will it be a whole, that Katie Wilson will rise to the occasion and bring in a whole new set of people.
Bump, bump, bump. Put it on the Trump. Indeed. Cliff, tell me your final thoughts.
Well, so first of all, Timmy, thank you for joining us tonight. I'll say that there are some areas where I agree, some areas where I disagree. One in which I agree, Trump was definitely a factor for driving turnout. When you had this wave of moderates come in 2023, turnout was abysmal. And, we're still in the Biden years. And, even though there is some discontent with President Biden, he definitely was not Donald Trump. There's many critiques, but still the amount of unconstitutional chicanery and just horrible quasi crypto-fascist behavior that we've seen in the last, was it 9 months? It hasn't even been a year. That we've seen from Trump. It has really driven turnout. But I think this was more a pendulum swing due to affordability and how complex the problem has been. And it hasn't been it hasn't just been a problem this year. There's been an ongoing problem for the last couple of decades that we've seen progressive city councils tackle, and we've seen a lot of moderate to center left mayors tackle. Now we have a mayor that's very much to the left, and we'll see what happens. But also we do have still a mixed city council, even though Sarah Nelson, who's decidedly a leader of the council, has now been dethroned, right? We're going to see a coalition of, I don't want to call it coalitions just yet, because we'll see how those dynamics play out. But we're going to see a coalition of people who are left and even one or two center lefties versus a more conservative and moderate coalition, attempt to tackle the problem.
Well, on your community radio station, Rainier Avenue Radio.world, you will see more of the community election connection on a variety of different levels, whether you're watching Cliff Cottom's show, Cliff's got his show coming up tomorrow. You'll have Juan on Rainier.
Oh, sorry, I mean on Thursday.
So on your community radio station, we want to thank Tim Traynor so much for jumping in.
Thanks, Tim.
We will see you. And hey, we're from South.
Thank you, guys. A pleasure.
And
Nice meeting you, Cliff.
My man.
Appreciate you, brother.
Bye, JC.